Hi, this is Mike Peterson from Challenge Island, Oakland County East, back with another one of our Steam-tastic Fridays. We're in the middle of our Steam Bee series right now, where we're taking a look at one of the really impressive scientists and engineers of the animal world, or the insect world in particular, the honeybee. So to recap where we came from in our science lesson a couple weeks ago, we talked about all the incredible parts of the bee and how those all come in handy for all the work that a bee needs to do to make our world a better place. In particular, we're going to talk a little bit more about the abdomen today. So now last week we also talked about how the bees have some pretty cool technology that they use to make honey. So they start out with the flower, they go get some nectar from the flower, they turn that nectar into honey, but today we're going to talk about one other cool product that comes out of their production process. As they're making that honey, they make the honey, and of course we get to eat that, and that's really tasty, but they also take some of that leftover honey and they turn it into beeswax. So the bees have a special extra stomach or extra pouch inside their abdomen that allows them to turn some of that leftover nectar into beeswax. In fact, if you take a look at this picture, you can kind of see how they do that. So the wax is formed inside, and it actually comes out of their abdomen. So if you can see those little white sheets coming out of there, those are tiny little particles of beeswax that the bee can then turn into wax to make its hive. So the bee actually brings that into its mouth, it actually kind of licks it up and then chews it a little bit to get it nice and soft and warm, and then turns it into the hive. So when we look at how the bees make the hive, if you ever see a video of that, all the bees work together, all those worker bees make one big great team and work together to build their beehive. And when they do that, one of their challenges is, how can we do that as efficiently as possible, just like how engineers try to be efficient in the real world? So what they do is they need to figure out what would be the best shape to make that hive. So if we think about it, the bees are pretty smart on this account. So there's a lot of shapes in the world they could choose from. So for example, they could choose a circle, they could choose a square, they could choose a triangle, but they choose a hexagon. They choose a six-sided shape. So why is that? Let's take a look at those shapes a little more closely here. So we're going to throw a little math in here on you. So if you take a look at some kinds of shapes, for example, circles, or if you look at pentagons, for example, five-sided shapes, those are nice shapes, but if you take a close look here, there's some big spaces in between there. So if you try and stack a lot of balls together or a lot of pentagons together, they kind of waste some space. There's some extra space in the middle there. So the bees try to pick a shape where they're not going to waste any space. So if you take a look at all the shapes in the world, that only narrows it down to 3 different kinds of shapes they can choose from. They could choose a triangle, they could choose a square, or they could choose hexagons. So the reason they decide on hexagons, the other thing that's really important to them, is to use no more beeswax than is necessary. So they want to waste as little as possible. And if you do all the measurements, if you take a look at a bee's hive made out of triangles or out of squares, that would use extra honey. Where if you make it out of hexagons, that uses, out of the wax. But if they make it out of the hexagons, that uses as little wax as possible. So that's the most efficient design. Plus, since they all know hexagons are the shape that they're going to make, they can all work on it at the same time. They don't have to talk to each other too much to figure it out. Everybody knows they need to start making hexagons to make that beehive work. So those are some of the secrets that the bees use, or the engineers side of the bees use, to get that hive put together. And then once they got the hive, they can store honey in it, they can store nectar in it, they can store leftover pollen in it, all kinds of great uses for that hive. Plus they can live in it, of course. So next time you're taking a look at bees or thinking about honey, think a little bit about the shapes that go into making that beeswax, and think about all the incredible engineering that goes into making that beeswax possible and the beehive. All right, with that, thank you very much for joining us this week, and we'll see you next time.